It's a new liturgical year and we're having fun, experiencing joy, and it's the Advent special for Spirit and Spire starting right now.
Broadcasting from the Cathedral of the Assumption in Louisville, Kentucky, this is Spirit and Spire. And now, here is your host.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spirit and Spire. I'm your host for this episode, Brian Kane, and it's the Advent episode. All right, now I'm joined as always by my co-hosts. Over here we've got Eric Huff.
Hello, everyone.
John Soule.
Hi.
And Isaac Fox.
Hi there.
And we're so excited to be back for another episode of Spirit and Spire. Remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe. Share with your friends and family and anyone else that you think wants to hear about things happening in the Archdiocese of Louisville. And don't forget, if you want to correspond with us on the show, you can email us at spiritandspire@aol.com. So thank you for being here. We're going to talk about Advent today. It's coming up quickly. We're a couple Sundays away as of this recording from Jesus Christ, King of the Universe, the final feast of the church year.
I've already celebrated it at a Latin Mass parish recently, so I think that it was further back historically. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
they were on the old calendar.
Yeah, the old calendar.
All right. Well,
Which could have been that old because Christ the King is only 1921. Is it instituted?
Well, actually, it was 33 A.D. when he
I was
became
gonna say,
king of the universe.
Sure.
To be fair, Christ has been king for quite a while.
A long time, but on the official
Right,
liturgical
right.
calendar, yeah. It's the end of the year.
Depending on which nature we're talking about, he was probably king of the universe a lot longer.
Ooh, that's
True. When we go to God the Son,
that might be heresy.
I guess we're eternal. Okay, anyway.
Let's get away
digress.
from heresy and to the general norms of the liturgical year and the calendar.
All right.
Any good episode on Advent should start with the general norms of the liturgical year and the calendar. But I wanted to read this because, one of the things we're going to talk about is what Advent is. And so I thought, why not go to one of the church's sources on what Advent is, the general norms for the liturgical year and the calendar. And it says this, and this is a much more sober take on Advent than my introduction has.
Well, yeah,
has
because
set it up
if you
for,
can't
but
tell, we're a little bit loopy and having fun. So anyway, let's get into this.
Advent has a twofold character. As a season to prepare for Christmas, when Christ's first coming to us is remembered, and as a season when that remembrance directs the mind and heart to await Christ's second coming at the end of time. Advent is thus a period for devout and joyful expectation. Advent is a period for devout and joyful expectation. And I really think that, all joking aside, I think that is a really beautiful description of Advent. We're, of course, preparing for Christmas and to remember Christmas in a special way, but also that's all supposed to direct us toward the second coming as well. And I always, whenever I think of Advent, I always latch on to the joy aspect as well. We're going to talk later about the different Sundays of Advent and Gaudete Sunday, which is one of my favorites, Gaudete meaning joy. But I think for a lot of people, to think about being joyful in a world that has a lot going on,
Right.
there is a lot of turmoil, a lot of trouble, a lot of polarization. The culture of death seems close at times. The idea of fostering devout and joyful expectation might seem challenging to a lot of people. And so I wanted to open up the floor to, and I know we did a whole episode on happiness and joy.
That, yeah.
But, how are you guys thinking about joy in today's world, and where are you looking for joy, and how are you preparing and trying to foster that joyful expectation as we head into the Advent and ultimately the Christmas season?
I'd start with the fact that we were all kind of joyful laughter when we started this episode, which wasn't intentional. It's just how we kind of came into this episode, and that's a gift.
Until you buffered us out just now, but
Oh, well, sorry, guys.
joy police over
To
here.
anybody watching right before this episode started, it was pretty silly in here.
Yeah, we were making
pretty silly.
goofy jokes that made no sense, and that's pretty much how we operate our entire
Impressions.
lives.
I think they made sense. I think you just didn't understand.
It was great. There was impressions of Gollum. There was all kinds of great stuff happening.
Goofy things. But the laughter, I think, is what I'm trying to get at. Okay, not just the content that may or may not evoke laughter from some people who hear these jokes, okay? But the general nature of laughter. Think of, Abraham and Isaac, or Abraham and Sarah in their old age, the surprise of a lifetime, of being given the gift of laughter, a gift of joy, meaning they had a child despite them not even believing it, all this longing, and they had a baby, and Isaac's name in Hebrew is actually translated to English as laughter. And
Hey, that's my name.
Hey, it is. Look,
It
Isaac,
is.
laughter. No wonder we're
I
all
thought
joyful.
laughter was your name.
Oh, yeah.
Like my brain is like, what?
laughter.
Oh, like my name was actually Laughter.
Yeah, I was like,
Yes.
your name's Isaac.
And welcome our co-host, Laughter Fox. Right here. That's ridiculous.
Which
Okay.
is what we're going to call you from now
And our
on.
co-host Eric, who is not keeping up with the conversation right now.
right. Derailed again. Okay. This is why you're buffered. No, okay. Laughter is to me
This is the episode I get kicked off the podcast.
part of the joy
I
that
feel
we're
it.
seeking. It requires, I think, to be able to laugh, to have a sense of humor, to be open-minded enough to get over yourself. Stop being so serious about everything. And it doesn't mean you don't address hardships and deal with conflict or try to avoid suffering. I think it's more about learning how to stop being a stick in the mud and just be hopeful and let people, let people live and laugh. And I mean, that phrase, live, laugh, love? There's some wisdom there, even if it's from Hobby Lobby, generally.
St. Teresa of Avila came to mind. One of her quotes is, "Deliver us, Lord, from sour-faced saints."
Yes.
Yes.
And then St. Philip Neri is a known saint prankster. He would do all kinds of funny stuff, but one of them was he once shaved off half his beard this way and went outside and preached to everybody.
I think he was invited to like a pretty high society
Yes.
event.
Yes.
And the patron thought it was like an act of prestige to have St. Philip Neri there. And then Philip Neri showed up with half a beard, which is hilarious.
That is
I had a
pretty
friend in high school, and he's one of those early bloomers with the facial hair. Like he had a Chuck Norris beard when he was like 13.
And if you shave off Chuck Norris's beard, there's just another fist underneath.
There's just
I forgot Chuck Norris jokes.
Yeah.
These are so great.
He was decided to shave one day, and he got halfway done. And it's never like halfway in a way that makes sense. Like it was the Philip Neri halfway done. And he looked at the time and he was late for the bus, so he just ran to the bus
That's awesome.
and caught the bus and went to school that day with half a beard. It's awesome.
Philip Neri tangent. He was said to have been given a gift of a very large heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when they
that's right.
exhumed his body, his heart was physically
Large.
too big for his chest.
Kind of like
cavity.
a Grinch
like the rib shape
situation.
broken.
There was
Crazy.
a moment in prayer where there was a visible appearance of the Holy Spirit came down and entered through his mouth inside of him, and I think wasn't that associated with the enlarging of his
Yeah.
heart?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'd never heard any of this.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
he was remarkable. Yeah, John.
It's a hard
Getting
tale.
off the subject briefly of half-shaved beards, which brings me a lot of joy, actually, just hearing that, because it's pretty funny. But you said something about humility, and I think that true joy, true laughter requires humility and requires hope. Because those are two words that you mentioned, and I thought of a line from G.K. Chesterton, who always has a line. He seems to always have a line for everything, and it's usually very, very witty and very, very good. And I don't remember the exact line now, but he does speak of being small or little and looking up at things instead of down at them, and how you have so much more appreciation for the wonders of the universe when you're no longer looking down, the sense of pride. And so I think we get a lot more joy out of things when we ourselves are very little.
I think it's just gratitude.
Yeah.
It's gratitude.
Well, speaking of that, I do have a G.K. Chesterton line on gratitude. He said that the surest sign of a happy person is their ability to express gratitude. So if someone's expressing gratitude, it's generally someone who's very happy. But if you're a stick in the mud and you're like, oh, this is terrible, and you're complaining a lot, then obviously that's the sign of someone who's not.
Thanks, Eric.
We don't do family prayer that well, but one of the things we do is we say everybody says one thing they're thankful for every day, and it's to that end of trying to foster that, like, and sometimes the kids are in the middle of a tantrum or like whatever, or they're mad at me for like asking them to kneel or whatever it is.
Hard to be grateful
I'm not thankful for anything. It's like we can always find something to be thankful for.
That sounds like me. That sounds like me during our family prayer.
And then, like,
Yeah, that's more Eric.
and then they'll go, I'm thankful for this box. and then I go, okay. We say thank you, God, and everybody says thank you, God.
This box.
Or whatever.
That's awesome.
So
I remember I had a particularly difficult time. It was 2015, and I was in Philadelphia. Pope Francis was visiting America, and I was struggling with my life because, this was before my wife and I came together, and before Family Renewal Project came into my life. A lot of things were kind of bubbling up at this point in my life. And I remember being at the statue of the Thinker, and we were standing in line for confession, and I looked up and I saw...
Well, the statue of the Thinker, is this the...
It's like the guy who's doing
like the
this
nude
right now.
thinker?
Yeah, that
Okay.
guy. I don't even remember.
All right. I want to make sure I'm visualizing.
Yeah. So I was standing in line for confession. I look up, and one of my old spiritual directors just happened to be in Philadelphia hearing confessions. And I was like, this is so cool. And so I was expressing all my frustrations about life and things. And he said, John, you're in Philadelphia at the World Meeting of Families, and you're getting ready to see Pope Francis drive down the street. Be grateful.
Yeah.
And so my penance was I had to thank God for 5 things that day before the end of the day. Or no, thank 5 different people for whatever. It was very intense, and it just pierced into my heart of the reason I'm so frustrated is because I'm not intentionally grateful, thankful, and aware of the gifts that God's given me in people and in all the circumstances. I mean, we're in one of the greatest countries in the world with the greatest freedoms that any human society has pretty much ever been given.
The greatest country.
The greatest country. Let's just say that. Right. If you go to Wyoming and the rodeo, they definitely will say that unapologetically.
Yeah.
But they're talking just about Wyoming.
Right, just Wyoming.
It's like Texas,
Yeah.
And we should acknowledge our Swedish and Mongolian fans as well, that we think that Sweden and Mongolia are cool too.
Yeah, they're
And
cool
you,
too.
you could actually say that in Swedish, so I don't know any Mongolian.
Yeah. So
Can you say,
super cool?
Say, okay, I interrupted you, so can we
That's it.
let's
They
redo
got
it.
it.
Okay.
They got it right.
Our Swedish fans are very perceptive. Yeah. They are. Yeah.
Anyway, joy, gratitude.
So let me transition here a little bit because, so joyful, but there's something here that's also deeper because it's a period of devout and joyful expectation. And remember, what are we expecting? Not only Christ coming on Christmas, which I feel like what we've talked about thus far is especially for me related to sort of family and friends and the laughter and stuff like that. But there's also an element here of devout and joyful expectation of the second coming. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people, the idea of Jesus coming on a cloud like right now or tomorrow morning or something like that would not elicit a response of...
Yeah, many people be scared. Be terrifying.
Well, Scripture says that people will drop dead when that happens. So what... the word I read here was a season to prepare as well. So how are we devoutly and joyfully preparing and expecting not only Christmas, but also the second coming? Like, what's the difference between someone who drops dead on the second coming and someone who is joyful and excited?
I think primarily through the means of the sacraments and Christ coming through the Eucharist, at every mass. So I would say that's like what a third form of what you're talking about, and in that preparation, and not just in some theological level, but just in real life. I always tell people this, and I don't know how much they think I'm exaggerating, but after experiencing that Christ is really truly present in the Eucharist, and truly believing that, if you truly believe that at every single mass, I've completely lost any starstruckness. So like Jack Nicholson could like walk into the room and right now, and I feel like any of that has kind of burned away from me, because if you truly believe that you're seeing Jesus Christ every single day, that you're experiencing his coming at mass, it's hard to get excited, about whatever celebrity, or I guess, for lack of the better word, or maybe it is the right word, any idol that pop culture throws out. It's an experience like no other, and I think that that's a great preparation, both on a theological level and practically in our own lives.
That's a really good point.
A couple of things come to my mind as far as preparation for the second coming of Christ, and that the preparation for the coming of Christ is something which happens at the end of our lives for every single one of us,
No matter what.
Yeah.
And I was raised in Protestant circles, and this wasn't like my family, but I was very aware of certain groups that were very focused on end times. And this is when the Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins books were coming out, the end time books, and Frank Peretti, he had all those books, and people were certainly wondering. I can remember when barcodes were maybe the sign of the beast, and all of this, and so there's a lot of emphasis on when is the end of the
No.
They actually are,
Yeah.
About when the end of the world comes, when is Jesus coming back. And the interesting thing is that the assumption there always made is that it's going to be in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to be one of the ones seeing Jesus come back. And well, the reality is that we face the end times at the end of our life for every single one of us, and have been for thousands of years. And so that's what we need to be prepared for. And so when you asked the question, Brian, a thought that came to my mind was a beautiful story of, I want to say it's St. Robert Bellarmine. In fact, I'm almost 100% positive it was Bellarmine. He was with a group of young men. I think there were some students of his, and he was playing a game of chess. He was known for being an avid chess player. And Robert Bellarmine is a saint. He was completely devoted to God, right? His entire life was about God. And a conversation had come up amongst his students of, if you knew Christ was coming back today, or if you knew this is the day you died, something along those lines, what would you do? And they were all being very pious. And they were saying things, I'd give my money away. I'd sell, I'd give to the poor. I would go on this pilgrimage. I would say these prayers. I go to Mass, whatever it was. And they finally turned to Bishop or Cardinal Bellarmine and said, what would you do? And he looked up and he said, I finished playing this game of chess. I began it for the glory of God, and I can imagine no better way to die than doing something for the glory of God. And that's just,
Did he win the game?
I don't think it would have mattered to him, actually. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he lost and then beat the student over the head with the chessboard.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But that's but no, that's just really beautiful to me, because while we all need that preparation, there's a really inspiring story of a man who was so at peace because his entire life had been given over to God, that it was like, it doesn't matter if it's today, tomorrow, next year, everything I'm doing is for God anyway. So just total peace.
Yeah.
To me,
Until he lost the game, and then
Sorry, it's
the
giving me
peace was gone.
That was.
Then there was just pieces.
Eric will go to confession later.
I didn't.
Pieces.
I didn't anticipate you to throw it back at me and it to be so funny. So like, I've had a first and second wave of how funny that joke was. So you guys can expect a third wave later in the
If there's
podcast.
unexpected giggling somewhere in this episode,
Always-
it'll be the third
Always
wave.
a third wave.
Peace was where I wanted to land, because to me, if you think if Jesus came back
I'm
tomorrow,
sorry, Brian. I'm thinking of landing your pieces on a chessboard.
clearly I'm not going to be able to land this plane.
Yeah.
Or these
Thanks for
pieces.
trying.
peace is where I wanted to land. If you imagine Christ coming back this hour, like you see him in the sky right now, and you think, oh, I got to go give away all my money, that to me is a sign that you are not at peace with your conscience.
Right.
And to me, the more at peace you are with your conscience, the more likely you are to be joyful when Christ comes. Should you see him at the end of your life or at the end of time, should you live to see that. And so my encouragement to everybody would be, if you feel that lack of peace, that it is in the sacraments, it's in confession, it's in making right your relationships, it's in sacrificing for your family and for God and your friends, that's where that peace comes from. And if you have that peace, you'll be at peace when Christ comes.
And also getting just added, and this goes on with our Advent too, preparation is through Scripture, is taking the time to really look at Scripture, to read Scripture, to get to know Christ. Obviously we have it during Mass, that the Scriptures are proclaimed to us, but sitting down and studying the Bible. And St. Jerome said, ignorance of Scripture is ignorance of Christ. And, by reading the Bible, it's funny how people are like, oh, I don't get this archaic language, or it's so difficult. It's just like the same 5 themes just repeat themselves over and over in all these different stories in all these different ways. And really, at the end of the day, it really shows you how to walk with God and how to live a Christian life. Now whether people who read the Bible do that or not is on them, but it is the user guide.
And to your point, if you're already walking with God in your day to day, it's not going to be a huge shock when you're walking with him face to face.
So if anybody hearing Brian was thinking, man, how do I get my conscience right? Maybe you're not ready to step into a church or whatever the situation is. How do I make sure that if Christ were to appear in the sky today, that I'm ready? Is I don't know how Protestant this sounds, but it's all in the book. It's all in the book.
Go read the Gospel of Luke. All right, we're going to end our first segment there, and we will be back in just a moment with more of the Advent episode on Spirit and Spire.
Hey everyone, this week's episode is sponsored by Family Renewal Project. FRP is a local theology of the body apostolate in service to the Archdiocese of Louisville. They're dedicated to renewing the culture through the renewal of the family. They have so many amazing things going on, so check them out at familyrenewalproject.com.
Welcome back to Spirit and Spire. I'm your host, Brian Kane, and in this second segment, we turn to our resident trivia expert, our resident historian, our resident knower of things, Mr. Eric Huff.
Yeah.
Eric, I think you just got called trivial.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, and I'm glad it takes a lot
Just
of burden.
because the things he knows are trivial doesn't mean that he himself.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Well, eventually everything in history becomes trivial after enough time passes. So, sorry.
No, that's
No,
good.
not everything.
Okay.
Trivia means Trivia literally means 3 ways. So in ancient Rome, where 3 roads would meet, there would be signposts, little bits of information, and those became known as trivia.
Trivia.
So
if you know all the trivia, though, that would be, you'd be a helpful person. No, yeah, you definitely
You'd win a lot of Jeopardy games.
And by the way, I heard that once. I don't actually know if that's true, but trivia does mean 3 ways.
I thought you were going to say, I actually never heard that. I just made that up.
Never thought.
Just now, and I'm like, you're a genius.
This is great.
Right. So, yeah, I guess a little bit of background on Advent, where it comes from. How it's structured now is that in the 4th or 5th century, and there's probably a tradition with lines to the very, very earliest days of the church, and I would not be the one to argue against that. But just preparing for Christ, a 40-day fast, and then it becomes a feast day. I think in some of the Eastern churches too, that they still do fast. Oriental Eastern churches, that they still fast for 40 days. We talked a little bit about the history of the liturgical year ending at the beginning, and how the Feast of Christ the King is really the end of our liturgical year. So I guess in one way you could look at Advent as being the beginning of the liturgical year, the liturgical new year. So it's kind of funny to think about in the church celebrating the new year before Christmas, and then in just our daily lives, we celebrate the new year right after Christmas. So pretty close together. And after Vatican II, I believe, is, that would be the first when the liturgy changes, going into the new missal in 1970, is I would assume, and I'm pretty sure I've heard this, is that Advent, and people who are old enough to remember could probably tell me, is that I think the liturgy just flowed right into Advent. In the 1970 liturgy, we have the new liturgy, it's Advent. So important in the church, and I think focusing on that joy and that preparation of Christ too, with Advent, and of course 40 days. It translates now to more like 4 Sundays. Does that sound right to you guys?
Yeah.
And is it the third Sunday?
Yep.
All right, the third Sunday. I'll let Brian speak to that a little bit. It's his favorite.
Gaudete.
I do like Gaudete Sunday. It's so it's one of the pink Sundays.
Yeah.
So in Lent,
Why do you think I'm wearing a pink tie with purple? That's all.
We
is
didn't
that
get
really?
That's literally why. I knew we were doing an Advent episode.
That's liturgical living right there.
Yeah.
This is
Isn't
the
it-
male Kendra Tierney.
Oh my
Isn't it
god.
fuchsia?
It's
Yeah, they
I
don't
think
like
it's actually rose.
It's
I don't-
rose.
Rose,
Yes.
that's what it's
there's a controversy to
Well,
calling
it
it
says
pink.
rose, maybe.
I think
don't
rose is a shade of pink. I'm no lady, but
Shout out to all the pastors who probably have to hear like so many of the same jokes on that Sunday from every single person who leaves. Hey, Father, you look good in pink, or whatever.
this probably doesn't come as a surprise to you guys, but I was one of the guys who wore a tough guys wear pink t-shirt. Do you remember those?
Doesn't come as
Yes.
a surprise, man. That's old. You can speak to the previous generations on what was going on at that time.
I don't even know where that comes from. Is that rooted in a?
There was a big push at the time. I mean, guys to wear pink, and it was around the time that people were popping their collars on their polos.
Yes.
And sometimes, this was my favorite, is that they would have 2 polos on with both collars popped.
Right.
Like, it was stacked.
Why?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think pink was like trendy in men's fashion and
Torn up
and
jeans.
then people, were obviously making fun of people. So as a reaction, there were like bumper stickers and T-shirts and things that said "Tough guys wear pink," and usually they were hot pink shirts.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny.
It is pretty funny.
So I used to wear one of those, but yeah, Gaudete Sunday, the third Sunday. So 2 Rose Sundays in the liturgical year. Laetare Sunday is the third Sunday of Lent. I think the third, and then the third Sunday of Advent is Gaudete Sunday, and it's rose because it's mixing the white of the Christmas season with the purple of the preparatory season of Advent.
I didn't know
it's
that.
yeah. So and that's the same with Laetare. So it's a looking forward to the feast in the midst of this time of purgation.
Oh, that's
and,
beautiful.
and preparation and penance. And so my favorite Gaudete Sunday hymn, and in fact the only hymn that I know from that is a Gaudete Sunday hymn is.
I thought you were going to just
does anyone
end the
else know it?
sentence at
the
that.
hymn Gaudete, 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 Gaudete Christus es natus. Do you guys know that one?
I don't
No.
know.
Will you sing it for us?
Yes, I'm a little hoarse, but I'll try.
He's gonna sing, everyone. It's very exciting.
Gaudete, gaudete Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine, gaudete. Gaudete, gaudete Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine, gaudete.
That was
Thank you.
That was
Only
great.
only one voice crack, and there has to be some humility in everything I do.
Whenever you
right.
said I'm a little horse, I pictured you a small horse on the table, and then when you started singing, I pictured that small horse singing the song. Yeah.
But I
Don't
mean,
know if any of our listeners had that feel as well. Our non
probably no one.
I was going to say I doubt it.
yeah,
but,
those who aren't physically viewing the podcast, I hope that imagery really helped show you what transpired in this room.
All right.
but I just think that's so beautiful. The hymn says, "Christ is born, rejoice. Rejoice, rejoice. Christ is born, rejoice. Of the Virgin Mary, rejoice." And to me, and again, it's in the midst of this Advent season. It's a looking ahead to Christmas. But it's also like, we talked about sort of sometimes being overwhelmed by the culture of death or the polarization or the news of the day or whatever it is. But that ability for Christians to rejoice and say, well, actually the Savior is born. And in fact, not only is he born, he's already conquered, he's already won.
Yeah.
There's just great power in that, in the humble little babe. You talked about needing humility to have a sense of humor. Obviously God created senses of humor, but he also came in perfect humility. The creator of the universe appears in a dirty, cave. Like when we imagine the stable at the inn, we usually think of like a modern stable, but it was just
we think of it like a ski lodge or a country club, kind of with really nice bays of hail and all the animals there.
Bales of hay.
Bales of hay. Bays of hail.
This episode is just
lots of bays where hail has fallen and they've collected
that's
it.
more accurate than
Bales of hay, all of the
Can
things.
we
It's
please make
manicured.
that part of the hook?
And John, I'd like
haze of bale. Or no,
Bays of hail. Bays of hail. This is not what I meant. Haze.
Bays of hail.
Wait, what is it?
Streels of ball.
bales of hay.
It's not bales of hay. It's bales of. Regardless, what they do with the nativity is they make it manicured and perfect, and it's dirty and grungy and not desirable. It stinks. It's not.
You can blame St. Francis.
How did this happen?
But John, it wouldn't just be hay, it would be straw as well. So they probably had some boss trails.
Right, exactly.
The thing too, with that imagery in mind, is also the Eastern icons. It's clear; it almost looks like a little mountain or something, and they're in the rocks, in the nook, in the cave.
Where historically, you referenced St. Jerome already, but historically St. Jerome did his transcription or translation of the Bible in that cave.
Certainly in Bethlehem, and he thought maybe it was that cave.
Yeah. Are you saying that there's evidence that maybe it wasn't?
I mean, I don't think he knew for sure himself there was a cave, but he thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is definitely it's considered an A site as far as I understand from what our tour guide said when we were in Israel. He had described that St. Helena, mother of Constantine, built Byzantine churches when she visited the Holy Lands in the 300s. And he described it like this: 250 years ago, we have the Declaration of Independence. We still have that document.
Right.
So for them, 250 years was nothing, just like it is nothing for us as far as documentation. So when archaeologists found Byzantine church remains at different holy sites, they were able to determine that it in fact was the historical legitimate site where Christ was born, where he was crucified. All of these places are 100%, and the Nativity is one of them. Yeah. And there's actually just a few miles away from the church they've built there where he was born, there is this massive field they called Shepherd's Field, where the shepherds saw the angels. And within, tucked in the hillside there's actually a cave that you can go down and find. And while it's not historically the official cave, it's a cave that would have been similar possibly to the cave that Mother Mary and St. Joseph would have witnessed the birth of Christ in that moment. And so it was a very intimate experience for me and my wife and those on the pilgrimage. But I just think of the humility, the trust in God, the Son becoming human and entrusting himself. He didn't come in a hall of Congress. He didn't come in a CEO's penthouse. He came in a messy, obscure town, in obscure poverty. And he came in a family. And that to me is significant. He came to a family. And that's a gift that we can all, I think, marvel at and be grateful for.
A couple of things too. We're talking about Bethlehem, obviously, here. but even Nazareth, I mean, even in the scriptures you hear, can anything good come
Right.
from Nazareth?
Right.
And I think that there was a time when it was almost a joke that Jesus of Nazareth, because there wasn't any much archaeological proof of Nazareth even having existed. That's just how backwater it was. They clearly have the evidence now. And there's a great Cincinnatian, so I always have to throw them out. But Rabbi Nelson Gleck was the president of Hebrew Union College, and he spent a lot of time in the Holy Land doing archaeological research. And I think that he said he had never once seen the Bible proven wrong by archaeology, and in all of his time, there. So many decades. During a time when we had tremendous discoveries during his lifetime. So
And as much skepticism. I think it's not so much that archaeologists prove or disprove, it's that every person on Earth, including archaeologists and scientists, come into whatever field of study they're choosing with some level of bias, with an agenda, a worldview, a perception that will guide them toward, I don't believe in God, so I'm going to do everything I can to disprove that, or I do believe in God and I will, be open to seeing the evidence. But really it comes down to, for archaeologists and scientists to look at the evidence and determine how this evidence matches the patterns that we have been handed down to us by countless generations before us, without having a preconceived notion toward proving your opinion or perception. And I think that's maybe something that we as maybe our generation can, be part of the positive change toward that. To me, to be joyful and grateful includes openness to the absolute truth of things, the real reality, not just our historical or scientific bias.
Well, and that's something Pope Benedict talks about too, like with the historical critical method. Like it's great to dig in. He encourages that, but he also talks about make sure, when you're looking at the threads of the tapestry, that every once in a while you step back and admire the tapestry as a whole, and that you hear the whole story of salvation and all that stuff. And that's what I don't know that our generation does enough, is to look at the big picture. Even though I agree with whoever that rabbi was, that I've never seen anything, and not that I've lived that long or that I'm a PhD, but that I've never seen anything that contradicted the Bible archaeologically either. Only confirms it. Hezekiah's tunnel, there's coins from David's kingdom, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to transition here because you mentioned a family that Christ came and was born into, and we're going to talk about that more in the third segment. So we'll be right back with more Spirit and Spire just after this.
Hey everyone, another sponsor for today's episode is the Cathedral of the Assumption in the heart of downtown Louisville, Kentucky. It is the spiritual center of parish and family life and is a historic treasure for the Catholic Church in America. Take a tour or consider visiting for Mass. Check them out at cathedraloftheassumption.org.
All right, welcome whack to Spirit and Spire.
He did it. That was a throwback to the Bays of Hail. Wait.
Yes.
When you explain the joke,
Bays
Sean, it's a lot less funny.
It's a long fast
I
line.
believe it.
It's a lot less fun. Wait, yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. All right.
do you guys remember in the last segment when John said,
Okay. What?
Maybe
He
is
said
that a
Bays of
reference to-
Hail.
it's
Bales of hay.
it's Chris Farley would
Yeah,
say,
that's right.
my favorite one was he interviewed the guy who did the Jesus film. He goes, remember that part in the movie when Jesus got really angry and he was throwing over the tables in the temple? And he's like, yeah, I do remember that, Chris. He goes, yeah. Was that your idea? And he goes, no, it's in the Bible, Chris.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so good.
All right, kid.
So another thing that's in the Bible, and I should say another person that's in the Bible, is the Blessed Virgin Mary. And so we're now going to hear about some of the people that God, when he became man, came to and first appeared to. And obviously primary among those was our Blessed Mother, our mother and queen, And Isaac Fox is going to talk about that. Laughter Fox, as we call
Laughter
him around
Fox.
here.
Laughter Fox. That's a great.
Thank you, Brian.
Great spinoff. There you go.
And this is great because we're talking about Advent, we're talking about joy, Gaudete Sunday, and I don't know why we all have like this total case of giggles today, but it's perfect. It works.
It's a gift.
There is so much joy in the season that leads up to Christmas. But I was thinking, when we think of Christmas, we think of the actual coming of Christ. When we think of Advent, we think of the preparation for the coming of Christ. And one thing that came to my mind was John the Baptist out there in the wilderness saying, "Prepare the way of the Lord." So this idea of preparation. And so whether we're thinking of the past historical event of Christ's first coming, or Brian, as you're pointing out, we're thinking of the reality of his second coming, I think ultimately the big focus for us is on Christ coming into our own hearts, into our own souls on a daily basis for us individually. And that also calls for great preparation.
Yeah.
Just again, like John the Baptist, he's saying to make the paths of the Lord smooth, and so there's this idea that we need the grace of God to smooth out those paths in our hearts, to get rid of any obstacles so that we can be more fully prepared to welcome Christ. And historically, God spends centuries preparing his people. He calls a people, then first he gives them the law, which teaches them morally the right way to live. He gives them rituals, sacrifices, temple. All of this is teaching. All this is pedagogical stuff that's helping to prepare them. Then he sends the prophets. And the prophets explicitly reference the coming of the Messiah. And through their preaching and prophecy, sometimes encouraging, sometimes rebuking, they help to prepare the way of the Lord. But then finally, the very last generation before the incarnation, God does this remarkable act of preparation by preparing a remarkable woman to be the chosen vessel through which his son, his salvation would come to all the world. And so I think as we think of the Blessed Virgin Mary, I think it's impossible to think of Advent without thinking of her. I think there's a lot we can learn when we sort of contemplate her inner life, the graces and virtues, that she had, that we can learn from to help prepare our hearts to welcome Christ. But, as you guys know, and I'm sure our viewers know, I was raised as a Protestant. I converted to Catholicism, and so I'm also keenly aware that the honor and devotion that we give to Our Lady can seem to many to be excessive, to be misguided, maybe,
Borderline
or
worship.
heretical at worst. So what I wanted to do in this little segment is take a look. I thought this might be really interesting. Take a look at one of the most common Catholic practices that we do in relation to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and look at it in light of primarily the first chapter of Luke's Gospel. For two reasons. One, so that we can see how incredibly scripture-based our beliefs about Mary are. And then as we analyze it, kind of examine that, to be able to see those aspects of her life and her interior life that will inspire us this Advent. So, you guys up for a little Bible study?
Of course.
I love it.
Always.
All right, so the particular Catholic practice that I was thinking of is the Hail Mary prayer, right? We say it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Super common, and I think to some, if some of you are not Catholic, that can seem sound a bit shocking, to hear somebody saying the Hail Mary prayer. And the reality is that about 70% of it is just pulled straight from Scripture. And most of that from the first chapter of the Gospel of Luke.
Should we say it just for context in case
Sure.
there is a Protestant?
Yeah, so
Watch
that prayer is, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Did you say we need to say Hail Mary in case there is a Protestant watching, so that they would immediately turn it off right then?
Run away. No.
No, don't run away. No,
Not at all.
But there is definitely an issue here, a tension, and it's understandable. I think I've come from a Protestant background. I get where that tension can come from. So I kind of wanted to look at this for a moment, and this will tie directly into Advent, right? I promise. So In the first chapter of Luke's Gospel, and no more than up to like verse 54, we have these three big stories. The first is the annunciation of Gabriel to Zechariah, the aged priest, that he and his also elderly wife would have a son, John the Baptist. Zechariah is referred to and his wife as being righteous, and that they fulfill all the laws and commandments of God. And I think we could all hope to be even remotely that dedicated to God. But even so, faced with this seemingly impossible declaration, he doubts. And so Gabriel sort of verbally chastises him for doubting and tells him he is going to be mute, unable to speak until his son is born. 3 months later, a few months later, I think it's 3 months later, the same angel, Gabriel, appears to Mary and gives her the even greater announcement that she is going to bear the Son of God.
6 months later.
6 months later. I think, yes, you're right, it is 6 months later, because he says it is now the 6th month with your cousin Elizabeth. And then following hard on the heels of that, she goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth. So we have what we call the visitation, right? It is good, I think, to see these three in context. So I wanted to do was just walk through the prayer, and we're going to see some really cool stuff about Mary coming out of these passages. So the first part, Hail Mary, full of grace. We say the name Mary because we want to make clear who we're talking about, and her name was Mary. That wasn't in the original passage. But Hail, full of grace, is precisely the words that Gabriel greeted Our Lady with. And I want to focus in on this full of grace bit, because this is remarkable. It's impossible to translate into English. The Greek word here is kekerotomene, and it's a very complex Greek word. It does mean full of grace, but it means a lot more. So a couple of things we can look at here is St. Stephen, the first martyr in the church in the book of Acts, is referred to as being full of grace. It's a different Greek word. It refers to his state of life at that time. And clearly, though, Stephen was a really holy person. He's a martyr, right?
The first one, right?
The
Yes.
first one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
first
yeah.
one.
This is a big deal. But with kekerotomene, we have this idea of fullness of grace. And remember, grace is the antithesis of sin. So fullness, this means a maximum. Think of a bucket filled with water where there's no room for anything else, right? So Mary is just, every inch of her being is full of the grace, the presence, the life of God. But it also, and I don't remember the grammar bit here, it's like a passive participle infinitive thing. It's really complicated. It's a weird Greek word, but it indicates something that has happened in the past, is in the present, and continues to the future. It is also a Greek word which virtually doesn't exist. No one in history has ever had this as their name. And it's important to notice that the angel doesn't call her Mary. He says, Hail, full of grace. Full of grace is her name. Gabriel is speaking God's message to her. So it is actually God's name for Mary is fully graced one.
Just like when Jacob wrestled with the angel, he received a new name. Just like
Exactly.
Abraham received a new name, Mary was receiving a new name on some level.
Exactly. Except it wasn't a new name. It was the actual name that God had for her.
Yes.
And when we see the angel go to Zechariah, he calls him Zechariah. That's why I like to compare these two passages, right? Because they're so similar in this annunciation of remarkable births. But the differences are also as important. So it's almost impossible to translate this into English, but if you were to try, you would come up with something like this. Hail, you who have been filled to the maximum with God's grace, past, present, and future. No human has ever received a greeting like that in the Bible or in history. Right? If you actually dig into this, it's incredible. And so our ideas of the Immaculate Conception, the sinlessness of Mary, and again, it's God's gift to her. He's the one that did this.
And people get confused. I think it's important anytime we talk about the Immaculate Conception to remind people. A lot of times when people hear Immaculate Conception, they think of Jesus
Right.
and the virgin birth.
Right.
But we're talking about the Immaculate Conception, which is Mary's conception.
In the womb
That
of
God
Saint Anne.
preserved her from original sin.
Correct.
Yes.
He made her like a new Eve, like a new creation, so
Yes.
that she would be fitting to bear his son. That's kind of the general explanation. So I don't want to take this whole episode just on that word. But that Greek word, if you dig into it, it's incredible. And not only is nobody ever named that, there's some relations to that word, but there's not more than like a couple, 2 or 3 or so uses of that word ever in Bible or any other literature. Like it's almost a word invented for this purpose, to somehow try to describe Mary. So, Hail Mary, full of grace, and then the Lord is with thee. That's the next part of Gabriel's greeting. That is what we call the angelic salutation. Then the next part we say is, Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Again, we add the name Jesus here to make it clear who we're talking
to clarify
about.
what's
Right.
going on, right?
But this is what St. Elizabeth says when Mary goes to visit her directly afterwards. So we read that after Gabriel appears to Mary, she goes in haste to the hill country of Judea to be with her cousin Elizabeth, whom she's just found out is pregnant with John the Baptist. And it is, in fact, Elizabeth who says to her, Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. But the part I like to focus on here is, if we read the verse before this, Elizabeth, this is not just a human statement. It says that when Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the infant leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth, filled with the Holy Spirit, cried out in a loud voice and said, Most blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And how does this happen to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? So this is a woman inspired by the Holy Spirit to speak these words. Directly after, Mary responds with her great hymn of praise, the Magnificat, in which she says, Every generation shall call me blessed. Every generation, including her own. Well, that had literally just been fulfilled. Elizabeth literally said, Blessed art thou among women, inspired by the Holy Spirit.
And then here's the most powerful part. The rest of her Magnificat, she doesn't say a word about herself. She only makes that statement.
All about God.
And everything
And his
else is
greatness.
about what God has done, how he's fulfilled the promises, and how he's lifted her up as well as all of Israel up. That's really the point. She's only making a statement of humility based on what God has done in her life. And we're simply, just like Jesus honored his parents, his mother, his father, we're paying honor to Mary in that great gift and that expectation that we're hoping to receive at Christmas time this year as well. In some way.
You guys are familiar, I think, with Cameron Batuzzi. He's on YouTube. He does a wonderful...
Cameron Bahoozy?
Batuzzi.
No, I'm just kidding.
Bahoozy.
He's
I got it the
capturing
first time.
Yeah,
Christianity.
Capturing Christianity. Shout out, great channel. And he's friends with Matt Fradd from Pints with Aquinas, who, there's been a lot of discussion over the last year or two between the two of them. And Cameron is Protestant, and he's certainly done some very honest research into the Catholic Church, and he's talked about that a lot, even though as of to date, he's, still Protestant, but he's seems to have been very open to a lot of things. And I saw a comment he made the other day that he's begun looking into the Marian dogmas. And he put this little post up in where he said, I'm not going to quote this exactly right, but something to think about. And he quotes this, Every generation shall call me blessed. And he was like, when was the last time you called the Virgin Mary blessed, or something like that, right? And he gets it, because from that day to this day in the Catholic Church, every generation has quite literally said, Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb,
we call her the
Jesus.
Blessed Virgin Mary,
Yeah.
right?
So that prophecy was fulfilled in the Catholic Church. And then the second half of the prayer, we call her Mother of God. And this is the one that I think causes some consternation. And, you guys know, this is partly a theological thing, right? We could talk about the Council of Ephesus, we could talk about the Nestorian heresy and all that. I don't want to take time with that. First of all,
man.
yeah, that's another episode. It'd be a good one though.
Yeah. Have a
First
whole
of all,
episode on Mary.
we're not saying that Mary is the eternal mother of God, as if she's a goddess, that she caused God to exist.
Nope.
All of this has to do,
And it's also not a reference to the Old Testament.
right, the Queen of Heaven thing or whatever.
Yeah.
All of this has to do very simply with the fact that the church was protecting the doctrines concerning Christ. That Christ, yes, had two natures, but was only one person, right? Nestorius was saying there was two persons, a human person and a divine, and Mary only gave birth to the human person, right?
Ooh.
And so they're saying, no, the person that she gave birth to was God. Not that like she caused God. So, right, that would just be a misconception. But what I think is really interesting here is, we just heard Elizabeth say, who am I that the mother of my Lord should come unto me?
She named it. She said it.
And some might point out, well, Lord, not quite the same Greek word as God. Well, there are many words in the Bible for God. We have the Hebrew, the unspeakable name, Yahweh, which we don't even know what that, if we're saying it right, it doesn't exist anymore.
It's where you see in the Bible it's an uppercase L, Lord. The Lord.
And then we have Adonai, we have Kyrios, right? We have these different words. Well, what's interesting is if you look to this chapter, up to what we've talked about, the word Lord is used 12 times interchangeably with God, and every single time it means God. What does Gabriel say? The Lord is with you. Isn't he talking about God there, right?
Right.
My soul magnifies the Lord, says Mary. That means God, right? So quite simply, this is just a Greek translation thing. Elizabeth really is saying, the mother of God has come to me. And then the last thing we do is just ask her to pray for us. And the book of Revelation shows us angels and saints in heaven pray for us, and that they offer our prayers to God.
Yeah.
So it follows reasonably, if they're aware of us, if they hear our prayers and they pray on our behalf, that we can certainly ask them to pray for us. So really this entire Hail Mary prayer is pretty much straight from the Bible, and then we tack on, please pray for us. Right?
Can I throw some emphasis too on that?
Yeah.
That, clearly it's not a prayer, an adoring prayer like I think that many Protestants are accustomed to in their prayer. When you're asking someone to pray for us, I mean, that's a very, and I'm just thinking practical, not deeply theological here, but if you're saying pray for us, that's not how you speak to God.
Right.
You don't ask God, hey, God, pray for me.
Yeah, who would he pray to?
He doesn't have anyone to pray to. So there's a clear distinction even there. If there is someone who's very hung up on they're like, wow, this makes a lot of sense, but I still feel, there might be an idolatry angle, depending on my traditions and the customs I've been taught.
And to be fair, there are some people in the world, in the church even, that do sometimes go too far with their language, with their attitude, and they can make it seem, and maybe this is where some people have this perception that the Catholic Church worships Mary, because there are some attitudes within the church that can put Mary on such a level that they almost seem to negate God, forget God, don't really emphasize him enough because there's so much emphasis on Mary in an unhealthy way that can seem cultish, and it's hard. But yet, if you
I think that's extremely rare, though.
it is. That's the sad reality.
I think when you come from the outside, you have the assumption there must be a lot of that, even if it's like sort of theologically acceptable.
But that's why I think there's that bad rap.
The reality is that, no, I don't know, I think it's just misunderstanding, because the reality is that it seems in almost every case, those who are devoted to Mary are more devoted to Christ. Mary always leads us to Christ. But to your point, Eric, I think this is purely a linguistic issue, and it's purely about the word pray. Because the word pray used to have two meanings.
Right.
And the fundamental meaning of it is to ask. If we look into older English, more archaic,
Pray,
I
tell
pray
me.
thee, good fellow, or,
yeah.
So it literally means I ask or I beg. It never was something strictly to do with God. You could pray a living person next to you. I pray thee to do this for me. Prithee, good fellow, And so I think maybe after the English Reformation, perhaps, where prayers to saints would not be as welcomed, and over time this transitions, and so now when English-speaking people hear of praying, we think of it's only to God. But the issue would be if we were adoring or worshiping the saints.
Sure.
But when we say we are praying to the saints, it literally means we are asking them to pray on our behalf. So it's just, I think it's purely linguistic kind of problem there.
Yeah. Sure. My Protestant friends can't, to your point, when they think of the word pray, it automatically includes worship. Mm-hmm. And I always tell them, for Catholics, that is not a necessary element of prayer. Sometimes it is. Prayer can be worship.
Yeah, if it's directed to God,
to God. But when it's directed to someone else, pray tell me, sir, what time is it?
What I took from that is you have friends.
It is 1750
you didn't know that.
Universal Time.
Right.
So we're going to transition on that note to our next segment. So I'll call that segment was Catechesis with Laughter Fox. And we'll be back with our final segment just after these messages. This one message, it's really just one.
Hey everyone, here at Spirit Inspire, we want to serve our community by highlighting God's work in our parishes, schools, and apostolates. We hope to bring renewal and unity between all those in the body of Christ. If you would like a shout out in the next episode of Spirit Inspire, go to spiritinspire.com or email us at spiritinspire@gmail.com. Thanks and God bless.
Welcome back to Spirit and Spire. This is the Advent episode as we close the calendar year. We have a couple episodes left, I should say, but as we approach the close of the calendar year, but also as we kick off the liturgical year. And so our final segment is Mr. John Soule to dig even deeper into this mystery of the Blessed Mother, Mary.
My goodness.
That was a bit much, Brian.
Okay, I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm just like,
No pressure. No pressure.
Well, let me say first that Mother Mary had to have a sense of humor. She had to laugh. She had to have joy. That's the only way. Because there was intense suffering in her life. There was uncertainty. There was anxiety at times, right?
That image comes to mind of the visitation that you use in the rosary videos of Mary and Elizabeth. Like,
Yes.
just like laughing and like complete, like, what on earth is happening?
Right,
Like
and
Elizabher's
they're
pregnant
caught
in
up
her
in
old
it.
age and Mary's pregnant with God. And it's like, what? Like,
How is this real? Well, that particular image you're referring to is a painting from, well, there's two different ones I go to. One has literally, it's an icon, and you can see John the Baptist and Jesus within the womb of Mary and Elizabeth, which is pretty cool. But then the other one is a still frame of the movie from the Nativity story. So they took a still frame and somebody artistically rendered it, and it's just this magnificent, like, just Elizabeth is looking up in absolute wonder and awe at the God who fulfills his promises, and Mary is just looking down at Christ as Elizabeth's hand is on her womb, almost feeling the kick, and there's this overwhelming joy exuding from them. And it's this meeting of the Old and the New Testament, right? So if we're talking about preparation for Advent, there's this tendency, I think, for us to go far to the side of penitence, like Lent, to where unintentionally we can become joyless, where we think we have to purge ourselves to the point of depression, sadness, anxiety. And I don't even think that's what Lent is trying to do. Right? I think Lent is also, in some cosmic way, a thing of joy, a time of joy, because we know we are an Easter people. We're made for the resurrection. So all this purgation is really about stretching our hearts and teaching us to be open to the adventure God has for us. And this is, I think, what Mother Mary was doing when she said yes to the angel Gabriel, when she arose and went with haste to be with Elizabeth, her cousin, who was older and seemingly incapable of bearing children, which in a woman's old age, having a baby, giving birth, must, especially without the medical advances we have today, must have been a very dangerous time. So she's really rising up to go in service to her cousin. She stayed there 3 months. She was physically present, likely. It's not stated directly in Scripture, but it's likely that she was there for the birth of John the Baptist. So she would potentially have aided in that birth. And so there's an incredible intimacy and love that they would have shared together as cousins. But then she's coming home to Joseph. At that point, 3 months in, past the first trimester, she must be showing. And this would be the moment, because they didn't have ultrasounds, they didn't have pregnancy tests, they had what you could see and touch and feel. Eyewitness. And so there was this, she can't hide it anymore. She had to explain herself somehow. And the fact that she went and left and then all of a sudden comes back and is pregnant, what did she do while she was there? What was going on? And this is what I think Joseph was concerned about, not because he suspected her of cheating, but I think because he suspected others would suspect that, right? I think there's this unhealthy attitude we have towards St. Joseph, that he was righteous in the sense where he just suspected her of adultery. I think he was righteous and virtuous in such a way where he would know the woman he would be betrothed to so well that he would have had these conversations. He would have developed that trust with her in the healthy customs of the time, so that he would respect her dignity, he would respect his own dignity, and yet through her devotion to God, through her intimacy with God, and her perpetually vowed virginity, remember she was raised in the temple on some level, right? that she would have drawn him into her inner mystery, as a woman does for all of us. And this is, I think, Father Donald Calloway, he was saying in his book, Consecration to St. Joseph, talking about St. Joseph's attitude. So a man's attitude toward a woman, St. Joseph's attitude toward the Virgin Mary. You know, a woman's feminine genius draws a man into her intimacies. She is the master of her own mystery. So if Mother Mary is the perfect, essentially, in this case, archetype of what it means to be a woman, on some level, St. Joseph...
Or a disciple.
And a disciple, right? Well, all of this is connected, right? So you look at pregnancy, for instance, and it's 40 weeks roughly of gestation. So biologically speaking, it takes about 40 weeks from the time of conception to the time of birth, give or take a week or two, right?
My wife's been through a few of them, and she would tell you that it can be a Lenten experience.
And that's a big time of preparation. The Israelites were in the desert with Moses for 40 years. Noah in the ark, 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus being tempted in the desert for 40 days. This period of 40, this biblical number, in fact, when Christ died, he died around 3 o'clock, right? 3 o'clock, the hour of mercy, on Good Friday. And he rose from the dead, the first light on dawn of Sunday, the third day. If you look at the amount of time that would have taken, that would have been, 7 a.m. roughly, Sunday morning? That's 40 hours of time, from 3 p.m. to 7. And that, to me, it screams of this, reality of preparation connected to pregnancy. This period of time. Of course we're joyful. We're literally getting ready to welcome a new baby. I mean, what family isn't excited and joyful and laughing and hopeful in the weeks and days leading up to the birth of the new member of their family? And then when the birth happens, it's not like, okay, yeah, we had this big party. Okay, leave the baby alone. Like, there is on some level, like in our secular culture, this attitude of decorating our house for Christmas and getting the tree and all the things, and it's so Christmassy during Advent that within hours of opening presents, you see all these Christmas trees thrown out in the street. People have tossed their stuff.
Yeah, there's supposed to be 12 days of Christmas.
And there's supposed to be
after
12
Christmas.
days of Christmas.
We just had this argument at a family dinner. Right? We got to start the 12 days leading up to Christmas. I'm like, no, it's the 12 days starting at Christmas.
Exactly.
John, not to just kind of interject here, Dr. Brant Petrie in his book, Mary and the...
Is he paying you? You bring him up quite often. No, I'm sorry.
Dr. Petrie, if you're listening to this, I could use some...
I'll Venmo me.
Venmo me.
Compensation.
Yes.
Laughter Fox. On Venmo.
Laughter Fox. Struts
Laughter Fox. But no, in the Jewish Roots of Mary, he talks about the connection, which can sound a little dark, between the womb and the tomb, right? And that goes right along with what you were saying about Jesus being in the tomb, talking about the gestational period and so forth, and the fact that, I remember my oldest daughter some years ago having about a bit of a freak out moment about death. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't expecting it so early on, and I had no idea where to go with it. And the only thing I could think of was, because she was having little brothers and sisters all the time, and she was kind of knew what was going on with all that, was to explain to her it based in terms of pregnancy and birth. You are in, the baby would be in this, what they think is this perfectly safe and comfortable little world, and then it's going to come to an end, and it's painful, and you're getting squished and squeezed, and it's tragic, and you're pretty sure you're dying, and this is the end of everything.
Because nobody ever comes back.
Yeah, and what is on the other side, it turns out to be your whole life, your whole world, your whole adventure. Like, this is beautiful. And I was saying, that's what death is. It's really birth, right? It's really birth in the next life.
I'm keeping that one in my pocket.
yeah,
That's great.
seriously.
But,
It is.
But Dr. Petrie made this very interesting comment, because there's this tradition in the church that Mary's virginity, even physically, was preserved during the birthing process.
Yes.
Okay. And he pointed out, I never realized this, because
That's one of the dogmas of the Catholic faith, by the way. The dogmas considered the signposts of doctrine. Like, those are the things that you must believe as Catholic. Perpetual virginity before, during, and after the birth of Christ.
But nobody ever talks about it meaning that. It's just the assumption that she didn't have a relationship with a man.
That's why I wanted to highlight that,
And
that
he-
this is
he
literally a
talks about
dogma of
that.
the faith.
Yeah, he talks about that. And he pointed out, and I never even thought or noticed about this, we talk about Easter Sunday and the stone being rolled away from the tomb. He points out that happened after Christ was born. Resurrected, not born. This, Christ was already gone from the tomb, and it is later on that the angels come down and roll the stone away.
Are you kidding me?
No.
I've never
he digs into this in the
caught
book.
this.
And so he's saying that here you have, the womb and tomb connection, that covering is there. Christ passes through, as he passed through in his birth, with no damage done to the stone. Right?
Come on!
Yeah, it's really awesome.
Oh, and if they hadn't opened the tomb, nobody would have known he's gone.
Right.
So the angels had to do that.
It was to reveal his absence.
gosh.
It was not because Jesus needed the stone out of the way to get out.
Wow.
It's like the
He was God. He
unveiling.
just passed right through.
It's like the unveiling. You have to do this.
That's crazy.
It's like the unveiling of a woman on the wedding night with respect, with showing respect
Easy
and
now
reverence
here.
toward the veil.
Hey,
No,
children, there's children listening.
you have to hear this. There's this unveiling, but yet respecting and reverencing the veil.
Yeah.
This reality and intimacy, like St. Joseph would have been there the night of the birth, right? Was there a midwife? Unlikely. They're in a cave
unlikely.
with animals, right? I see paintings where there's a midwife suddenly provided. Like, why is she there?
That would have been providential if they did show
If they
up.
did, but yet, if she wasn't,
saying.
who
It
would
could
have
have been
been
a
there?
midwife.
It would have been St. Joseph. The intimacy, what he would have seen, what he would have felt, and the beauty of that intimacy still respected Mary's dignity as a woman. She was still the master of her own mystery, and she was still given the absolute dignity of her personhood in their relationship. Mary and Joseph were still conjugally in love. They were still showing conjugal affection without intercourse, without sexual, relations, and yet there was still that romance
Isn't
and
that what conjugal
intimacy.
means, though?
There is a connection to the two.
Or am I misunderstanding the use of the word?
Well, John Paul II in Theology of the Body gets into the heart of what conjugal means beyond just whether or not you've had sexual intercourse and consummated in the biological means, right?
Which clearly, since
Right.
they weren't doing that, but yeah.
Correct, they weren't. And so what he's
terminology
saying is
confused me.
that Mother Mary and St. Joseph, through their pure, unadulterated, virginal, selfless
They
love,
still had a union.
still
just it
had
wasn't the physical union.
passion, and love, right? Intimacy in such a way that sanctified and brought honor and integrity to the natural marriage of Genesis between men and women in the consummation of their wedding vows and their openness to life and raising children. Through that love that Mother Mary and St. Joseph showed, it actually brought a deeper meaning, a more eternal meaning to what we as men and women, do as family, right, in society, that so many people in the world have twisted, distorted, and misunderstood.
Well, isn't it awesome, too, to think of the fact that her vow of virginity and their celibacy as a couple, because it was so full of the true love of God, the true self-giving, leads not only to the birth of a child, but to the greatest birth of life, infinite life ever, which I think is a real lesson. All of us. Something was going through my head, though, while we're talking about this. Are any of you familiar with Thomas Merton's poem, The Quickening of St. John the Baptist?
No.
No, but I've heard of something to do with it. But
This is one of my favorite poems of all times, and I think it's perfect. Could I read it right now? This just popped in my head. I pulled up my phone a moment ago because this is the visitation. This is when John the Baptist leaps in Elizabeth's womb. This is just beautiful poetry, and you get this impression that he had meditated on this, that he'd gotten himself into the scene, imagined what it must have been like, Mary hurrying in haste, and what the meeting with Elizabeth was like.
I had a just as a connection here. I had I don't want to call it a religious experience, but I guess that's what it is. At Gethsemane on the feast of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist one year.
Well, this will be very
Yeah,
appropriate.
So you're a little bit.
Get ready.
So like,
You're
there's like
hair
some
standing
hairs
up,
standing
yeah.
up on
Are
the back
you
of my neck,
prepared
and I
for
know
a new birth here?
I've never, and just for the listeners at home, the Abbey of Gethsemane is where Thomas Merton,
And it's not that far from here.
yeah,
Right?
And I want to point out too, the whole point of his poem here, it is directed to the contemplative lifestyle of a monk, because he views St. John the Baptist in his mother's womb as being shut off from the world. So he views him as like an enclosed hermit or anchorite or monk, right? That's kind of part of the theme here. But there's so much joy in this. It's about the visitation. It's about the things preceding the birth of Christ. It seems perfectly Advent right now. So,
yeah, it's amazing.
I would like to read this. This is The Quickening of St. John the Baptist by Thomas Merton. Why do you fly from the drowned shores of Galilee, from the sands and the lavender water? Why do you leave the ordinary world, Virgin of Nazareth, the yellow fishing boats, the farms, the wine-smelling yards and low cellars, or the oil press and the women by the well? Why do you fly those markets, those suburban gardens, the trumpets of the jealous lilies, leaving them all, lovely among the lemon trees? You have trusted no town with the news behind your eyes. You have drowned Gabriel's words in thoughts like seas, and turned toward the stone mountain, to the treeless places. Virgin of God, why are your clothes like sails? The day Our Lady, full of Christ, entered the dooryard of her relative, did not her steps, light steps, lay on the paving leaves like gold? Did not her eyes as gray as doves, alight like the peace of a new world upon that house, upon miraculous Elizabeth? Her salutation sings in the stone valley like a Charterhouse bell, and the unborn St. John wakes in his mother's body, bounds with the echoes of discovery. Sing in your cell, small anchorite. How did you see her in the eyeless dark? What secret syllable woke your young faith to the mad truth that an unborn baby could be washed in the Spirit of God? O burning joy, what seeds of life were planted by that voice? With what new sense did your wise heart receive her sacrament and know her cloistered Christ? You need no eloquence, wild bairn, exulting in your hermitage. Your ecstasy is your apostolate, for whom to kick is the work of contemplation. Your joy is the vocation of Mother Church's hidden children, those who by vow lie buried in the cloister or the hermitage, the speechless Trappist or the gray granite Carthusian, the quiet Carmelite, the barefoot Clare, planted in the night of contemplation, sealed in the dark, waiting to be born. Night is our diocese, silence is our ministry, poverty our charity, and helplessness our tongue-tied sermon. Beyond the scope of sight or sound, we dwell upon the air, seeking the world's gain in an unthinkable experience. We are exiles in the far end of solitude, living as listeners, with hearts attending to the skies we cannot understand, waiting upon the first far drums of Christ the Conqueror, planted like sentinels upon the world's frontier. But in these days, rare days, when our Theotokos, flying the prosperous world, appears upon our mountain with her clothes like sails, then like the wise wild baby, the unborn John, who could not see a thing, we wake and know the virgin presence, receive her Christ into our night with stabs of an intelligence as white as lightning. Cooled in the flame of God's dark fire, washed in his gladness like a vesture of new flame, we burn like eagles in his invincible awareness, and bound and bounce with happiness, leap in the womb, our cloud, our faith, our element, our contemplation, our anticipated heaven, till Mother Church sings like an evangelist.
St. John the Baptist, pray for us.
Pray for us.
It's
I've
amazing.
never been exposed to Thomas Merton's poetry before, and I'm glad I was today.
My
And,
favorite part was the WWB, the wise wild baby.
I thought an amazing line was the jealous lilies,
Yeah, I love
jealous
that
of Mary.
Yeah.
and
I feel that poem needs a whole holy hour to unpack, just reading it over and over and
Yeah,
making
it's so
sense of
good.
it.
The
You
whole
know,
idea
at
of
least
Mary being contemplative too, because she always says she pondered these things in her heart. I love the line where he says, "You've drowned Gabriel's words in thoughts like seas," or something like that. Just the depth of for contemplation.
My last point that I have in brief is the idea of with St. John.
Is it about hail bays?
No, it's not
Okay.
about hail bays. Okay, we're done with that.
By the way, that was something, Eric, that was said earlier in the show.
Oh my gosh.
Or, yeah,
Wait, are you talking about earlier in the show when John said,
This is not my
Hail
point,
Bay.
everyone, just so you're aware.
Wait, what did he say?
Poor John.
Good laughter.
We
Poor
love
John.
All
They're
right.
not Baptist.
I'm not John the Baptist, but I feel like I'm in the wilderness right now with you all.
the quickening of
Preaching.
John's soul?
Preaching to the vipers.
John the Baptist was in the wilderness, and he may have felt like all around him was death, and decay because of the Old Testament. And he was the last Old Testament prophet, so he was crying in the wilderness to all the hypocrisy and jaded cynicism, the indifference of so many in his generation. And yet he knew that on some level he was being exposed to the Lamb of God because he had had that experience in the womb. There was something deeply subconscious about that experience, even if he couldn't remember it, because how many of us remember things that took place in our mother's womb while we were there?
I thought that was everyone.
Did you?
But yeah.
It reminds me. There's an Anchorman scene in Anchorman 2 where Steve Carell's character goes. They're talking about stories they all remember from their past together, and he goes, "Hey, do you guys remember when I was born?" And they're like, "Nobody remembers you when you were born. Not even you, Brick."
right, exactly. It's that kind of
Salvador
stuff.
Dali said he did.
Does he really say that?
Well, he's not alive anymore, but he did say, I'm pretty sure he said he remembered his birth.
That's an interesting.
I kind
Or
of.
was he did it?
All right,
Because he did
let
that
me-
publicly.
let me
Let's
finish it.
let
I kind of
John
believe him.
This is my last point. Okay, if anyone remembered their birth, it would have been Jesus Christ.
Why
and
haven't
here's
you
the
gotten to your
reason.
point yet, John?
I'm so.
Well, we
done
just
with
told you
all.
that Salvador Dali also remembered his birth.
All right, the tomb that Jesus came back from the dead from had never been used.
Correct.
It was a
Virgin.
virgin tomb.
Exactly.
And so death itself is a journey. It is a beginning. It is a birth. To the point where if we learn to die to ourselves, self-denial, in healthy ways, through this recognition that we're really embracing the preparation period. So on some level, we're all open to God filling our hearts, similar to Mother Mary saying yes to the angel and her womb being filled with Christ.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the virgin tomb transforms, gets untwisted. The lie of death gets untwisted to become the virgin womb, the place where life truly begins.
You know one of the reasons why I think
And that's what
it
Advent
is a
is
virgin
about.
tomb, why no one had ever yet been laid in that particular tomb, is because in all the history of the world, no one had ever died who was free from sin. Every other tomb is merited, it's deserved, because sin leads to death. That is the only time that somebody has died out of love and not because of sin.
My goodness.
And on that note, as we
Preparing
begin
the way of the Lord.
Advent, let us be like Mary in contemplation. Let us sit in adoration with beautiful poetry. Let us sit in the wilderness with John the Baptist. Let us take some time to really think about what would it be like if Jesus came again tomorrow morning or right now. Are we at peace? Do we have joy? Do we have work to do? We all do. Let's go to confession. Let's spend time in the scripture. And let's also rejoice because Christ, the Savior of the world, is born. And with that, we thank you for being with us today on Spirit Inspired. Thank you to my amazing co-hosts, and we will see you next week.